Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Spiritual Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of Flow by Mihaly C. Mr. C. I call him Mr. C. I have no idea how to pronounce that last name. Anyways, this book was inspired by an animated film that I saw recently with the same name. I don't think they're associated, but I have the links, the animated film link below, the official website below, for you to check it out. It's a very nice, heartwarming movie, and I believe it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Film. So, congratulations. Okay, so this is today we'll be reading chapter 5, and this is part 2. And as you can see, there are certain highlighted areas, and that means that there is a footnote in the back of the book, which we will read. Okay. Oh, okay. Let's see here. We are, okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Flow through the senses, the joys of seeing. It is easy to accept the fact that sports, sex, and even yoga can be enjoyable, but few people step beyond these physical activities to explore the almost unlimited capacities of the other organs of the body, even though any information that the nervous system can recognize lends itself to rich and varied flow experiences. Seeing, for instance, is most often used simply as a distance sensing system to keep from stepping on the cat or to find the car keys. Occasionally, people stop to feast their eyes when a particularly gorgeous sight happens to appear in front of them, but they do not cultivate systematically the potential of their vision. Visual skills, however, can provide constant access to enjoyable experiences. Menander, the classical poet, well expressed the pleasure that we can derive from just watching nature. The sun that lights us all, the skies, the stars, the sea, the train of clouds, the spark of fire. If you live 100 years or only a few, you can never see anything higher than them. The visual arts are one of the best training grounds for developing these skills. Here are some descriptions by people versed in the arts about the sensation of really being able to see. The first recalls an almost Zen-like encounter with a favorite painting and emphasizes the sudden epiphany of order that seems to arise from seeing a work that embodies visual harmony. There is that wonderful Cezanne bathers in the Philadelphia Museum, which, gives you in one glance that great sense of a scheme, not necessarily rational, but that things come together, That is the way in which the work of art allows you to have a sudden appreciation of and understanding of the world. That may mean your place in it. That may mean what bathers on the side of a river on a summer day are all about. That may mean the ability to suddenly let go of ourselves and understand our connection to the world. Okay. I'm going to read the rest of the page, I guess, and then I'll read the footnotes, the few footnotes in the back. Another viewer describes the unsettling physical dimension of the aesthetic flow experience, which resembles the shock a body feels when diving into a pool of cold water. When I see works that come close to my heart, that I think are really fine, I have the strangest reaction, which is not always exhilarating. It is sort of like being hit in the stomach, feeling a little nauseous. It's just this sort of completely overwhelming feeling, which then I have to grope my way out of, calm myself down, and try to approach it scientifically, not with all my antennae vulnerable, open. What comes to you after looking at it calmly, after you've really digested every nuance and every little thread, is the total impact. When you encounter a very great work of art, you just know it, and it thrills you in all your senses, not just visually, but sensually and intellectually. Okay, let's see. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out which footnote to read. Okay, I think I got it. So 107 here, that's page 107. Some of the most powerful contemporary insights on the psychology of aesthetics are in the works of Arnheim, 1954, 1971, 1982, and Gombrich, 1954, 1979, who stressed the role of order or negative entropy in art. For more psychoanalytically oriented approach, see the 3 volumes edited by Mary Guido, Psychoanalytic Perspectives on Art, 1986, 1987, 1988. Now, the quote that says there is that wonderful ... is from Mr. C. and Robinson in Press. And then that quote that says when I see works ... and on a day like this ... are from Mr. C. and Robinson, also in Press. Okay. Not only great works of art produce such intense flow experiences for the trained eye, even the most mundane insights can be delightful. A man who lives in one of Chicago's suburbs takes the elevated train to work every morning says, on a day like this, oops, did I read I think I read I think I read the footnote on that already. So, okay, on a day like this, or days when it's crystal clear, I just sit in the train and look over the roofs of the city because it's so fascinating to see the city, to be above it, to be there but not be a part of it, to see these forms and these shapes, these marvelous old buildings, some of which are totally ruined. And I mean, just the fascination of the thing, the curiosity of it. I can come in and say, coming to work this morning was like coming through a Sheeler precisionist painting. What the heck is that? Sheeler precisionist painting, because he painted rooftops and things like that in a very crisp, clear style. It often happens that someone who's totally wrapped up in a means of visual expression sees the world in those terms. Like a photographer looks at a sky and says, this is a Kodachrome sky. Way to go, God. You're almost as good as Kodak. Clearly, it takes training to be able to derive this degree of sensory delight from seeing. One must invest quite a bit of psychic energy in looking at beautiful sights and at good art before one can recognize the Sheeler-like quality of a roofscape. But this is true of all flow activities. Without cultivating the necessary skills, one cannot expect to make true enjoyment in a pursuit. Compared to several other activities, however, seeing is immediately accessible. Although some artists contend that many people have tin eyes, so it is a particular pity to let it rest undeveloped. It might seem like a contradiction that in the previous section we have shown how yoga can induce flow by training the eyes not to see, whereas we're now advocating the use of the eyes to make flow happen. This is a contradiction only for those who believe that what is significant is the behavior rather than the experience to which it leads. It does not matter whether we see or we not see as long as we are in control of what is happening to us. The same person can meditate in the morning and shut out all sensory experience and then look at the great work of art in the afternoon. Either way, he may be transformed by the same sense of exhilaration. The flow of music. In every culture, the ordering of sound in ways that please the ear has been used extensively to improve the quality of life. One of the most ancient and perhaps the most popular functions of music is to focus the listener's attentions on patterns appropriate to a desired mood. So there is a music for dancing, for weddings, for funerals, for religious and patriotic occasions, music that facilitates romance, and music that helps soldiers march in orderly ranks. When bad times befell the pygmies of the Ituri forest in Central Africa, they assumed that their misfortune was due to the fact that the benevolent forest, which usually provided for all their needs, had accidentally fallen asleep. At that point, the leaders of the tribe would dig up the sacred horns buried underground and blow on them for days and nights on end in an attempt to wake up the forest, thus restoring the good times. The way music is used in the Uturi forest is paradigmatic of its function everywhere. The horns may not have awakened the trees, but their familiar sound must have reassured the pygmies that help was on their way. And so they were able to confront the future with confidence. Most of the music that pours out of Walkmans and stereos nowadays answers a similar need. Teenagers who swing from one threat to their fragile, evolving personhood to another in quick succession throughout the day, especially depend on the soothing patterns of sound to restore order in their consciousness. But so do many adults. One policeman told us, if after a day of making arrests and worrying about getting shot, I could not turn on the radio in the car on my way home, I would probably go out of my mind. Mm, okay, now pygmies. Okay, the footnote for the pygmies. The use of music by the pygmies is described in Turnbull, 1961. The importance of oh, sorry. The importance of music in the lives of Americans is mentioned in the Meaning of Things, Mr. C. and Rokeberg Holton, 1981, where it was found that for teenagers, the most important object in the home tended to be the stereo set. The policeman's interview is also from the same source. How music helps teenagers recover their good moods and its role in providing a matrix of pure solidarity are discussed in Mr. C. and Larson, 1984, and Larson and Kuby, 1983. Okay. Music, which is organized auditory information, helps organize the minds that attends to it, and therefore reduces psychic entropy or the disorder we experience when random information interferes with goals. Listening to music wards off boredom and anxiety, and when seriously attended to, it can induce flow experiences. Some people argue that technological advances have greatly improved the quality of life by making music so easily available. Transistor radios, laser discs, tape decks blare the latest music 24 hours a day in crystal clear recordings. This continuous access to good music is supposed to make our lives much richer, but this kind of argument suffers from the usual confusion between behavior and experience. Listening to recorded music for days on end may or may not be more enjoyable than hearing an hour-long live concert that one had been looking forward to for weeks. It is not the hearing that improves life, it is the listening. We hear music, but we rarely listen to it, and few could have ever been in the flow as a result of it. And there is a footnote 4, recorded music. Recorded music makes life richer. I heard this argument propounded most forcefully, but I think quite erroneously, by the aesthetic philosopher Eliseo Vivas at a public lecture in Lake Forest College, Illinois, sometime in the late 1960s. Hmm. Okay. As with anything else, to enjoy music, one must pay attention to it. To the extent that recording technology makes music too accessible and therefore taken for granted, it can reduce our ability to derive enjoyment from it. Therefore, before the advent of sound recording, a live musical performance retained some of the awe that music engendered when it was still merely when it was still entirely immersed in religious rituals. Even a village dance band, let alone a symphonic orchestra, was a visible reminder of the mysterious skill involved in producing harmonious sounds. One approached the event with heightened expectations, with the awareness that one had to pay close attention because the performance was unique and not to be repeated again. The audiences at today's live performances, such as rock concerts, continue to partake in some degree in these ritual elements. There are a few other occasions at which large numbers of people witness the same event. Sorry, let's do that again. The audiences at today's live performances, such as rock concerts, continue to partake in some degree in these ritual elements. There are few other occasions at which large numbers of people witness the same event together, think and feel the same things, and process the same information. Such joint participation reduces in an, sorry, getting cross-eyed here. Such joint participation produces in an audience the condition Emile Durkheim called collective effervescence. Boy, they sure know how to use nice words. What is that word that they use? The word escapes me, but like, no, just nice, fluffy words that you could probably say it very simply in another case, right? Sorry, a little squirrel there. Such joint participation produces in an audience the condition Emile Durkheim called collective effervescence, or the sense that one belongs to a group with a concrete real experience. This feeling, Durkheim believed, was at the roots of religious experience. The very conditions of live performance help focus attention on the music and therefore make it more likely that flow will result at a concert than when one is listening to reproduced sound. But to argue that live music is innately more enjoyable than recorded music would be just as invalid as arguing the opposite. Any sound can be a source of enjoyment if attended to properly. In fact, as the Yaqui sorcerer taught the anthropologist Carlos Castaneda, even the intervals of silence between sounds, if listened closely, can be exhilarating. I remember my teacher said the silence between the sounds is more powerful than the sound itself. Interesting, eh? And that is a true statement. Okay. Because, in the Bible, it says, God says, be still and know that I am God. So the inference is that you have to be still, that God is within you, right? So you have to be still. You have to be silent to listen, not to talk, because we're so used to talking, like praying, right? God, give me this, give me that. I pray for this, I pray for that. But really, meditation is listening to God, being still, being in the silence. That's where the power is. It's where the silence is. Anyways, a little squirrel there. Sorry about that. Okay, Durkheim developed his concept of collective effervescence as a precursor of religiosity in his Elementary Forms of Religious Life, 1912, 1967. Victor Turner's Comunitas provides a contemporary perspective on the importance of spontaneous social interaction, 1969, 1974. The writings of Carlos Castaneda, e.g., 1971, 1974, so influential even a decade ago, now barely produce a ripple on the collective consciousness. Much has been said to discredit the authenticity of his accounts. The last few volumes of the enduring saga of his sorcerer's apprenticeship seem indeed confused and pointless. But the first 4 volumes contain many important ideas, intriguingly presented. For these, the old Italian saying applies. Oh boy, here's an Italian. Let's see. I don't know my Italian. Se non è vero, è ben trovato. I hope I said that okay. Or, it may not be true, but it is well conceived. Okay. Many people have impressive record libraries full of the most exquisite music ever produced, yet they fail to enjoy it. They listen a few times to the recording equipment, marveling at the clarity of the sound it produces, and then forget to listen again until it is time to purchase a more advanced system. Those who make the most of the potential for enjoyment inherent in music, on the other hand, have strategies for turning the experience into flow. They begin by setting aside specific hours for listening. When the time comes, they deepen the concentration by dousing the lights, by sitting in a favorite chair, or by following some other ritual that will focus attention. They plan carefully the selection to be played and formulate specific goals for the sessions to come. Listening to music usually starts as a sensory experience. At this stage, one responds to the qualities of sound that induce the pleasant physical reactions that are genetically wired into our nervous system. We respond to certain chords that seem to have universal appeal, or to the plaintive cry of the flute, the rousing call of the trumpets. We are particularly sensitive to the rhythm of the drums or the bass. Drums or the bass. The beat on which rock music rests, and which some contend is supposed to remind the listener of the mother's throbbing heart first heard in the womb. The next level of challenge music presents is the next level of challenge music presents is the analogic mode of listening. In this stage, one develops a skill to evoke feelings and images based on the patterns of sound. The mournful saxophone passage recalls the sense of awe one has when watching storm clouds build up over the prairie. The Tchaikovsky, a little sideways there. The Tchaikovsky piece makes one visualize a sleigh driving through a snowbound forest with its bells tinkling. Popular songs, of course, exploit. Popular songs, of course, exploit the analogic mode to its fullest by cueing in the listener with lyrics that spell out what mood or what story the music is supposed to represent. The most complex of music listening is the analytic one. In this mode, attention shifts to the structural elements of music instead of the sensory or narrative ones. Listening skills at this level involve the ability to recognize the order underlying the work and the means by which the harmony was achieved. They include the ability to evaluate critically the performance and the acoustics, to compare the piece with earlier and later pieces of the same composer, or with the work of other composers writing at the same time, and to compare the orchestra, conductor, or band with their own earlier and later performances, or with the interpretations of others. Analytic listeners often compare various sensations. Analytic listeners often compare various versions of the same blues song, or sit down to listen with an agenda that might typically be, let's see how von Karajan's 1975 recording of the second movement of the 7th century. Okay, let's do that again. Let's see how von Karajan's 1975 recording of the second movement of the 7th Symphony differs from his 1963 recording. Or I wonder if the brass section of the Chicago Symphony is really better than the Berlin brasses. Having set such goals, a listener becomes an active experience that provides constant feedback, e.g., Van Karajan has slowed down. The Berlin brasses are sharper but less mellow. As one develops analytic listening skills, the opportunities to enjoy music increase geometrically. So far, we have considered only how flow arises from listening, but even greater rewards are open to those who learn to make music. The civilizing power of Apollo depending on his ability to play the lyre. Pan drove his audiences to frenzy with his pipes, and Orpheus with his music was able to restrain even death. These legends point to the connection between the ability to create harmony in sound and the more general and abstract harmony that underlies the kind of social order we call a civilization. Oh, sorry about that. Uh, let me read that paragraph again since I wasn't looking at the screen and the paragraph got cut off. Okay. So far, we have considered only how flow arises from listening, but even greater rewards are open to those who learn to make music. The civilizing power of Apollo depended on his ability to play the lyre. Pan drove his audiences to frenzy with his pipes, and Orpheus with his music was able to restrain even death. These legends point to the connection between the ability to create harmony in sound and the more general and abstract harmony that underlines the kind of social order we call a civilization. Mindful of that connection, Plato believed that children should be taught music before anything else. In learning to pay attention to graceful rhythms and harmonies, the whole consciousness would become ordered. That's an interesting theory. Teaching children to teaching children music before anything else. And then teaching the kids to pay attention to the rhythms and harmonies of the music. Teaching them to enjoy and to appreciate, right? Music before they learn anything else. That's a very interesting theory. Okay, anyways. Ah, all right. Sorry about that. Sorry about the back and forth here. Okay, Plato expresses his views on music in the Republic, Book 3, in the dialogue between Glaucon and Socrates about the aims of education. The idea that children should not be exposed to either plaintive or relaxed music because both will undermine their character. Thus, Ionian and Lydian harmonies should be eliminated from the curriculum. The only acceptable harmonies are the Dorian and the Phrygian, because these are the strains of necessity and the strains of freedom, inculcating courage and temperance in the young. Whatever one may think of Plato's taste, it is clear that he took music very seriously. Here is what Socrates says, Book 3, page 401. And therefore I said, Glaucon, musical training is a more potent instrument than any other, because rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward place of the soul, on which they mightily fasten, imparting grace and making the soul of him who is rightly educated graceful. Alan Bloom, 1987, ESP, is that especially? I don't know. Page 68 to 81 provides a spirited defense of Plato and an indictment of modern music, presumably because it has an affinity for Ionian and Lydian harmonies. Interesting. Now that's interesting. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just curious what frequency the Ionian and Lydian harmonies were. I wonder if it's a dead harmony. I wonder if these harmonies are still being played somewhere around the world. I don't know. It's a very interesting question. But I am interested, I'm curious to see what frequency the Ionian and Lydian harmonies are, and what frequency the other two, the one that's not acceptable according to Plato, are. What is it? The Dorian and Phrygian, what those frequencies are. Because remember, Nikola Tesla says if you want to understand the universe, understand vibrations, energy, and frequency. So music is a form of frequency. It's also a form of vibration. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but they are interrelated. They are different. They're interrelated. I mean, frequency and vibration. Interesting. I have a textbook on the medicine of vibration, I think it's called. I gotta look it up. Dig it out. Look it up, dig it out. Okay. All right. Oops, here. Our culture seems to have been placing a decreasing emphasis on exposing young children to musical skills. Whenever cuts are to be made in the school's budget, courses in music, as well as art and physical education, are the first to be eliminated. Hmm. I think they should be the last to be eliminated, right? Okay. Anyways, it is discouraging how these three basic skills, as important for improving the quality of life, are generally considered to be superfluous in the current educational climate. Deprived of serious exposure to music, children grow into teenagers who make up for their early deprivation by investing inordinate amounts of psychic energy into their own music. They form rock groups, buy tapes and records, and generally become captives of a subculture that does not offer many opportunities for making consciousness more complex. Even when children are taught music, the usual problem often arises. Too much emphasis is placed on how they perform and too little on what they experience. Parents who push their children to excel at the violin are generally not interested in whether the children are actually enjoying the playing. They want the child to perform well enough to attract attention, to win prizes, and to end up on the stage of Carnegie Hall. Yeah, I was a victim of that. But I have to say, though, being trained in classical music uh, helped me to appreciate classical music as I grow older. I didn't like it when I was actually performing and, you know, playing, but it did help me to appreciate the music, when I was out of it. Anyways, interesting. Just a little side note there. By doing so, they succeed in perverting music into the opposite of what it was designed to be. They turn it into a source of psychic disorder. Parental expectations for musical behavior often create great stress and sometimes a complete breakdown. Lauren Hollander, who was a child prodigy at the piano and whose perfectionist father played first violin in Toscanini's orchestra, tells how he used to get lost in ecstasy when playing the piano alone, but how he used to quake in sheer terror when his demanding adult mentors were present. When he was a teenager, the fingers of his hands froze during a concert recital, and he could not open his clawed hands for many years thereafter. Some subconscious mechanism below the threshold of his awareness had decided to spare him the constant pain of parental criticism. Now, Hollander, recovered from the psychologically induced paralysis, spends much of his time helping other gifted instrumentalists to enjoy music the way it was meant to be enjoyed, or to enjoy music the way it is meant to be enjoyed. Hmm. Okay, so the Lauren Hollander story is based on conversations we had in 1985. Interesting. Okay. Although playing an instrument is best learned when young, it is really never too late to start. Some music teachers specialize in adult and older students, and many a successful businessman decides to learn the piano after age 50. Singing in a choir and playing in an amateur string ensemble are two of the most exhilarating ways to experience the blending of one's skills with those of others. Personal computers now come with sophisticated software that makes composition easy and allows one to listen immediately to the orchestration. Learning to produce Learning to produce harmonious sounds is not only enjoyable, but like the mastery of any complex skill, it also helps strengthen the self. And it's interesting how music, um, writing music is a left brain activity because it's very organized. It's numbers and things like that, but it's also a right brain activity. So it harmonizes the left and right brain, which is, what you need to do if you're for the flow experience. This is just my interpretation. You need the left brain and the right brain to work together. And that's what intuition is, in a way, Interesting, eh? Okay. The joys of tasting. Gioacchino Rossini, the composer of William Tell and many other operas, had a good grasp of the relationship between music and food. With love, what love is to the heart, appetite is to the stomach. The stomach is the conductor that leads and livens up the great orchestra of our emotions. If music modulates our feelings, so does food. And all the fine cuisines of the world are based on that knowledge. The musical metaphor is echoed by Heinz Meyer-Lipnitz, the German physicist, who has recently written several cookbooks. The joy of cooking at home, he says. Compared to eating in one of the best restaurants, it is like playing a string quartet in the living room as compared to the great concert. For the first few hundred years of American history, food preparation was generally approached in a no-nonsense manner. Even as late as 25 years ago, the general attitude was that feeding your face was all right, but to make too much fuss about it was somehow decadent. In the past 2 decades, however, the trend has reversed itself so sharply that earlier misgivings about gastronomic excesses seem almost to have been justified. Now we have foodies and wine freaks who take the pleasures of the palate as seriously as if they were rites in a brand new religion. Gourmet journals proliferate. The frozen food sections of supermarkets bulge with esoteric culinary concoctions, and all sorts of chefs run popular shows on TV. Not so long ago, Italian or Greek cuisine was considered the height of exotic fare. Now one finds excellent Vietnamese, Moroccan, and Peruvian restaurants in parts of the country where a generation earlier one couldn't find anything but steak, and where a generation, sorry, got a little cross-eyed there. Let's read that sentence again. Now one finds excellent Vietnamese, Moroccan, or Peruvian restaurants in parts of the country where a generation earlier one couldn't find anything but steak and potatoes for a radius of 100 miles around. Of the many lifestyle changes that have taken place in the United States in the past few decades, few have been as startling as the turnabout concerning food. Eating, like sex, is one of the basic pleasures built into our nervous system. The ESM studies done with electronic pagers have shown that even in our highly technological urban society, people still feel most happy and relaxed at mealtimes. Although while at table, they lack some of the other dimensions of the flow experience, such as high concentration, a sense of strength, and a feeling of self-esteem. But in every culture, the simple process of ingesting calories has been transformed with time into an art form that provides enjoyment as well as pleasure. Okay, so a footnote here about eating. Eating, for instance, ESM studies show that of the main things adult Americans do during the average day, eating is the most intrinsically motivated. Graph, Mr. C. and Giannino, 1983. Teenagers report the second highest levels of positive effect when eating, after socializing with peers, which is the most positive, and very high levels of intrinsic motivation, lower only than listening to music, being involved in sports and games, and resting. Mr. C. and Larson, 1984, page 300. The preparation of food has developed in history according to the same principles as all other flow activities. First, people took advantage of the opportunities for action, in this case, the various edible substances in their environment. And as a result of attending carefully, they're able to make finer and finer distinctions between the properties of foodstuffs. They discovered that salt preserves meats, and that eggs are good for coating and binding, and that garlic, although harsh tasting by itself, has medicinal properties and, if used judiciously, imparts subtle flavors to a variety of dishes. Once aware of these properties, people could experiment with them and then develop rules for putting together the various substances in the most pleasing combinations. These rules became the various cuisines. Their variety provides a good illustration of the most infinite range of flow experiences that can be evoked with a relatively limited number of edible ingredients. Much of this culinary activity was sparked by the jaded palates of princes. Referring to Cyrus the Great, who ruled Prussia about 25 centuries ago, Xenophon writes with perhaps a touch of exaggeration, men travel over the whole earth in the service of the king of Persia, looking to find out what may be pleasant for him to drink. And 10,000 men are always contriving something nice for him to eat. But experimentation with food was by no means confined to the ruling classes. Peasant women in Eastern Europe, for instance, were not judged to be ready for marriage unless they had learned to cook a different soup for each day of the year. Oh, holy moly! Each day of the year, that's 365 days. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's a big challenge. Okay, here's a footnote on Cyrus the Great. The information comes from Xenophon's 431 BC to 350 BC Cyropedia, a fictional account of Cyrus's life. But Xenophon is the only contemporary who had actually served in Cyrus's army and who has left a written record of the man and his exploits. See also his Anabasis, translated as The Persian Expedition, Warner, 1965. Hmm. In our culture, despite the recent spotlight on gourmet cuisine, many people still barely notice what they put in their mouths, thereby missing a potentially rich source of enjoyment. To transform the biological necessity of feeding into a flow experience, one must begin by paying attention to what one eats. It is astonishing as well as discouraging when guests swallow lovingly prepared food without any sign of having noticed its virtues. What a waste of rare experience is reflected in that insensitivity. Developing a discriminating palate, like any other skill, requires the investment of psychic energy. But the energy invested is returned many times over in a more complex experience. You know, it's interesting. His use of psychic energy kind of throws me off a little bit. I wonder if he's doing that on purpose to confuse people. Hmm. I don't know. It just kind of occurred to me. I mean, I read that word a few times. It just kind of throws me off in the context that he uses it. Okay, so sorry about that. A little squirrel there. The individuals who really enjoy eating develop let's read that. Okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I got a little distracted there with that phrase, psychic energy. Okay. Developing a discriminating palate, like any other skill, requires the investment of psychic energy. But the energy invested is returned many times over in a more complex experience. The individuals who really enjoy eating develop with time an interest in a particular cuisine and get to know its history and its peculiarities. They learn to cook in that idiom, not just single dishes, but entire meals that reproduce the culinary ambience of the region. If they specialize in Middle Eastern food, they know how to make the best hummus, where to find the best tahini, or the freshest eggplant. If their predilection includes the foods of Venice, they learn what kind of sausage goes best with polenta? And what kind of shrimp is the best substitute for scampi? Like all other sources of flow related to bodily skills, like sport, sex, and aesthetic visual experiences, the cultivation of taste only leads to enjoyment if one takes control of the activity. As long as one strives to become a gourmet or a connoisseur of wines because it is the in thing to do, striving to master an externally imposed challenge, then taste may easily turn sour. But a cultivated palate provides many opportunities for flow if one approaches eating and cooking in a spirit of adventure and curiosity, exploring the potentials of food for the sake of the experience rather than as a showcase for one's expertise. The other danger in becoming involved with culinary delights, and here again the parallels with sex are obvious, is that they can become addictive. It is not by chance that gluttony and lechery were included among the seven deadly sins. The fathers of the church well understood that infatuation with the pleasures of the flesh could easily drain psychic energy away from other goals. The Puritan, oh, sorry. I'm really distracted by that word, psychic energy. I was thinking my teacher says, any kind of addiction, whether it's sex addiction, drug addiction, alcoholic addiction, food addiction, any kind of addiction like that, it's just the body's desire going amok, which means that you don't have the spiritual energy needed to regulate, right? The addictions. So for people who truly um, overcome their addiction, you hear stories of people overcoming their addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. There is always uh, true recovery from my observation, at least. True recovery consists of an element of uh, God or spirituality, not so much religious, but spirituality for sure. Because I think, uh, religion is man-made, it's dogma, but God is spirituality. God is supposed to be life-transforming, not ritualistic, and religion is ritualistic. This is just my opinion, my observation. So I'm wondering here with his psychic energy, I guess I can probably uh what's the word I want? Replace the word with spirituality, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Very interesting. Um, that would make more sense to me to replace it with spirituality. I don't know. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd be very curious to see what you think about that. Hmm. Um, okay. So I'll just backtrack a little bit. The fathers of the church well understood that infatuation with the pleasures of the flesh could easily drain psychic energy away from other goals. The Puritans' mistrust of enjoyment is grounded in the reasonable fear that given a taste of what they are genetically programmed to desire, people will want more of it and will take time away from the necessary routines of daily life in order to satisfy their craving. My teacher gave a really good analogy, and that kind of uh, resonates with me. He says we have, the body, we have the emotion, and we have the mind, the mental, right? They're like three wild horses, and the chariot is our higher soul. If the chariot is not in control, the charioteer, I guess you call it, or the person, driving the chariot, whatever you call them. If he's not in control of the horses, the three horses will go amok. And so that would be, you could call it the ego, I don't know about that. To a lesser extent, the ego, but really your higher soul or spiritual or God or spiritual or divine or whatever you want to call it, you know. I think the higher soul makes more sense to me because it's the closest to who we are. And of course, there are many different levels and experiences of God, in my opinion. But you know, if you have the three horses, the physical, the emotion, and the mental, if you don't have you don't want to oppress it or suppress it. You want to regulate it. You want to, I don't even want to use the word control. You want to regulate it, you know, give it boundaries, give it tasks, give it directions, give it instructions, you know, and that comes from the higher soul. So it's there for a purpose. Uh, but what the religion, like the Catholic religion or the Christian religion or the Puritans in this instance, what they did was suppress it and oppress it. And the more you oppress something or suppress something, the more uh, it wants to burst out. Because I don't think, as human beings, I don't think we're meant to be suppressed or oppressed or enslaved. We're meant to, you know, we're meant to explore, we're meant to innovate, we are meant to create, but in a regulated way. And so there has to be an element of morality and ethical, you know, spirituality involved. Spiritual maturity, I guess that's what you would call it. Because otherwise, we'd just be running around going wild, not really uh, thinking of the consequences. And really, that's what's happening in our world right now. Okay, sorry about that. I am going off on a really far tangent here. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to put thoughts into words. Yeah, I'm not very good at expressing myself. Uh, which is probably why I'm not a public speaker. Or it could be that I need more practice. I don't know, whatever. Okay. That's why I like to read. Reading's nice. Okay. Um, where was I? Ah, the Puritans. I think let's read the footnote on the Puritans. Puritans and enjoyment. On this topic, see the extensive history by Foster Rea Dulles, 1965, Jane Carson's account of creation in colonial Virginia, 1965, and chapter 5 in Kelly, 1982. Okay. But repression is not the way to virtue. When people restrain themselves out of fear, their lives are by necessity diminished. They become rigid and defensive, and their self stops growing. Only through freely chosen discipline can life be enjoyed, and still kept within the bounds of reason. If a person learns to control his instinctual desires, not because he has to, but because he wants to, he can enjoy himself without becoming addicted. I kind of sort of said that earlier, didn't I? Um, a fanatical devotee of food is just as boring to himself and to others as the ascetic who refuses to indulge his taste. Between these two extremes, there is quite a bit of room for improving the quality of life. In the metaphorical language of several religions, the body is called the temple of God or the vessel of God, imagery to which even an atheist should be able to relate. The integrated cells and organs that make up the human organism are an instrument that allows us to get in touch with the rest of the universe. The body is like a probe full of sensitive devices that tries to obtain what information it can from the awesome reaches of space. It is through the body that we are related to one another and to the rest of the world. While this connection itself may be quite obvious, what we tend to forget is how enjoyable it can be. Our physical apparatus has evolved so that whenever we use its sensing devices, they produce a positive sensation, and the whole organism resonates in harmony. To realize the body's potential for flow is relatively easy. It does not require special talents or great expenditures of money. Everyone can greatly improve the quality of life by exploring one or more previously ignored dimensions of physical abilities. Of course, it is difficult for any one person to reach high levels of complexity in more than one physical domain. The skills necessary to become good athletes, dancers, or connoisseurs of sight, sounds, or taste are so demanding that one individual does not have enough psychic energy in his waking lifetime to master more than a few. But it is certainly possible to become a dilettante in the finest sense of that word in all these areas. In other words, to develop sufficient skills so as to find delight in what the body can do. End of chapter 5. Interesting. Well, I had some interesting curiosities in this chapter. What's your thoughts? I'm curious to see what you think, of certain topics that we talked about in this particular episode. Put it in the comments below. It'd be very interesting to start a conversation. Anyways, I hope you enjoy that, and we will continue our reading next week. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day. Okay, bye-bye now.